The Two of Cups. The Ghost of the Louvre's game continued, and Alberto and Leia walked through the dark halls, ready for new challenges. After their fierce battle with the flaming wands, they thought the toughest part was behind them. However, the Ghost of the Louvre was far from simple, and a new mysterious trial soon appeared before them. The hall they entered was darker and more enigmatic than the previous ones. The walls, covered with ancient tapestries, reflected the dim light emanating from magical candles. In the center of this hall stood two figures, a man and a woman, judging by their voices, although their faces were hidden behind massive masks. The man wore a wolf mask, and the woman wore a fox mask. They were both seated at a small table with two beautiful goblets filled with deep burgundy wine. "Who are they?" Leia whispered, looking around nervously. "They seem to be the guardians of this hall," Alberto replied, sensing the magical aura emanating from the goblets. "And there's something off about those goblets." They took a few steps forward, hoping to avoid conflict. But as soon as their presence was noticed, the man and woman turned to them, and their masks seemed to come alive, glowing with a dim light. "Who dares to disturb our peace?" came the man's quiet but ominous voice. "You have ventured where you should not have," added the woman, her voice soft yet filled with mysterious power. Alberto and Leia tried to speak, but the magical adepts were not inclined to dialogue. The man and woman raised their goblets and, with enigmatic smiles, poured the contents onto the nearest statues and objects. The wine, upon touching the marble, immediately began transforming the inanimate into the animate. Statues that had stood motionless for centuries began to come alive. Weapons displayed in glass cases trembled and suddenly flew out, filling with invisible energy. "Oh no, not this!" exclaimed Leia, dodging the swing of a massive knight statue that had just come to life. "The wine in the goblets is magical," Alberto deduced, summoning his magic. "We need to stop them before they animate everything in this hall." The adepts continued pouring the wine, and the animated objects began attacking Alberto and Leia one by one. Majestic statues of ancient gods, knights, and even ancient tapestries suddenly writhed like living snakes. Alberto tried to use his magic to freeze the animated objects, but the effect of the wine was too strong. Each statue and item not only came alive but seemed possessed by ancient spirits. "We need to stop them," shouted Leia, dodging one of the stone giants that tried to grab her shoulder. Alberto noticed that the adepts were not only pouring the wine but somehow controlling it. Each of their gestures set new statues into motion, as if they were conducting the chaos. "Try to distract them. I'll come up with something," Alberto shouted, swiftly raising his hand to create a shield to protect Leia. Leia, always quick and agile, darted to the nearest column, circled around it, and, as was her habit, grabbed a rope and threw it toward one of the adepts. The rope wrapped around his arm, and the girl yanked him towards her, causing the man to lose control of the goblet. The goblet fell to the floor, and the wine spilled over the marble. Meanwhile, Alberto began casting a spell. He focused on the goblet in the woman's hands. His magic wasn't very strong yet, but he knew a trick that might work. Alberto aimed at the goblet, envisioning how his magic affected the liquid inside. Like a thin icy wind, his spell began to freeze the wine. The goblet in the woman's hands trembled, and the wine inside began to turn to ice. "No!" she cried, trying to stop Alberto, but it was too late. The ice filled the goblet, and her control over the statues weakened. At that moment, Leia skillfully directed her rope at the second goblet, still held by the man. She leaped forward, yanked sharply, and the goblet flew to the floor, shattering into pieces. The wine spread across the floor, but the magic no longer worked. The animated statues momentarily froze, then, as if deprived of energy, slowly returned to their original positions. Blades and objects suspended in the air fell with clattering sounds. The adepts, having lost their magical goblets, quickly vanished like mist at dawn, leaving behind only emptiness and silence. Leia took a deep breath, glancing at Alberto. "Great job with the freezing," she said, smiling. "And you handled the rope perfectly, as always," he replied, grinning back. They both breathed a sigh of relief, looking around the hall, which had returned to calm. The ghost of the Louvre's game was still ongoing, but it seemed they had conquered another trial. Chess game on the roof. After another victorious challenge with the magical goblets, Alberto and Leia emerged onto the roof of the Louvre. Under the moonlight, they were greeted by a breathtaking sight. The entire roof was laid out like a gigantic chessboard, with the pieces not merely stone statues but gargoyles, majestic and ominous, frozen in various poses. The lanterns illuminating the roof were so whimsical and beautiful that even the splendid park lanterns they had seen earlier seemed pale in comparison. These lights, with their curved arches, rose above the game, as if highlighting a magical field where a new scene was unfolding. "What is this?" Leia asked, gazing in awe and trepidation at the covered chessboard. "It looks like another game from the Ghost of the Louvre." Chess. Alberto squinted. "And not just chess. There's clearly magic involved here." Before they could discuss their next move, the gargoyles began to move. The majestic pieces came to life, ready for the game, and at that moment, the familiar voice of the Ghost of the Louvre echoed. "Welcome to the final match." The voice was filled with irony and quiet malice. "This game is not as simple as it may seem. To win, you'll need to not only strategize your moves but also consider the magical laws in effect here." Alberto frowned, assessing the board. He had been familiar with chess since childhood, and his confidence slowly returned. But the game promised to be challenging. The gargoyles were arranged as in a regular chess game. Pawns were smaller statues, bishops and knights looked majestic and ominous, and the queens and kings radiated powerful magical energy. "We'll play by voice commands," Alberto whispered to Leia. "We say where to move, but remember, this is not regular chess. Magic has been added. We need to be prepared for surprises." He made the first move, commanding one of the gargoyle pawns. "Pawn to e4." The gargoyle pawn surged forward, its eyes igniting with fire, and with each step it took, cracks appeared beneath it. As soon as the pawn reached its place, something changed. A fiery whirlwind swirled around it, filling the space with intense, scorching magic. "Magical effect," Alberto said. "Each piece may carry not just tactical value but magical." The ghost's response was swift. His pawn moved forward, and around it began to swirl a cloud of black smoke, creating an invisible barrier. Leia watched the game with growing tension. She understood that this was not just another confrontation of pieces. The rules of chess were intertwined with magic, and every move could influence the outcome. Knight to f3. Alberto made the next move. The knight, a winged gargoyle, soared into the air, flying over the board, its shadow flickering across the squares. When it landed on f3, its wings stirred the air, creating a powerful gust of wind that blew away the black smoke from the ghost's pawn. Now it was the Louvre's turn. The ghost seemed to deliberate longer, and finally, his queen moved forward, forming a sphere of dark light around herself, as if engulfing everything around. Alberto knew that the queen was the most dangerous piece on the board, and with the addition of magic, even more so. The queen is too strong, he muttered. But we can maneuver around it. Bishop to c4. The gargoyle bishop with graceful wings moved forward, and beams of light burst from its paws, slicing through the darkness created by the ghost's queen. It was a strategic attack, weakening the opponent's position. As the game progressed, Leah noticed that the surrounding lanterns began to flicker, illuminating various corners of the roof. The light danced over the exhibits displayed along the edges of the chessboard, revealing unusual artifacts, ancient magical mirrors casting reflections into unknown dimensions, ancient blades surrounded by a soft blue glow, and living paintings depicting scenes from a distant past. "Look!" Leah shouted, pointing at one of the ghost's pieces. "It's not just a statue. It's moving." Alberto saw one of the Louvre's pawns explode with magical fire and transform into a dragon. But it was his move. "Rook to g1," he commanded. The gargoyle rook, resembling a massive castle with towers, shuddered and moved forward. As soon as it took its place, energy surged from its base, surrounding all of Alberto's pieces with a magical barrier, protecting them from subsequent attacks. The game continued with tension. Every move by the opponent was accompanied by unexpected magical effects. But Alberto, an experienced chess player, felt that control was gradually shifting to his side. In his next move, his queen battled the ghost's queen, and it was finally defeated. "Checkmate," Alberto sighed with relief as his king reached the decisive position. The ghost's gargoyles froze in place, and their light began to dim. Somewhere in the distance, a faint, annoyed moan of the ghost of the Louvre could be heard, seeming to lose strength with each defeat. "We've almost won," Leah said, looking over the board. "But it's not over yet." Having won this chess game, Alberto and Leah felt that the end was near, but ahead of them lay the final, most challenging trials.